Yo, it's the exam coach checking in with you with another podcast episode, this time on techniques for managing exam stress and anxiety, episode 216. So, exam stress and anxiety is something that comes up in my direct message so much, whether it be WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram. Students are talking about their stress and anxiety, both related to exams specifically, but then also anxiety in general across the whole year. Now, it's a huge topic, and it's one that's very much at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, both adults, researchers, the media, and also obviously students, because that's who it's affecting, and it affects all age groups. But today we're just going to look at some techniques that I've seen work for me, and I've read up about in some research I've done that might just help you get a handle on it, and especially when it comes to the exam situation, be able to control the stress and anxiety and be able to actually do your best, because that's essentially what it stops us from doing. It stops us from doing many things, but within the context of exams, it stops us from doing our best and performing to the level that we know we can. Okay, so I thought we should start off by defining exam stress and anxiety. So let's take a look. I think it was actually difficult to pin down a specific definition for each, and I looked at a number of different sources. So one of them is the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. They had a few wishy-washy definitions. And then I looked at the good old NHS. They had a couple of definitions there. And what I've come to is this. So in short, it seems like stress is the body's reaction to a trigger, and generally tends to be a short-term experience. And it can be positive or negative, depending on, I think, how severe it is. But it makes us feel things, and sometimes has some physical symptoms too. So things like insomnia, poor concentration, impaired ability to do the things we would normally find easy. And it's just a response to a threat in any situation, whatever that might be. So an exam could be a threat to a lot of people because it's a situation where you don't know the outcome. There's a lot of uncertainty. You're going to be put in a challenging situation. It's a big stressor. Anxiety seems to be like this thing that's a bit more long-term, and it seems to bubble under the surface, and then it can be triggered by stressful situations. And that's when you get things like, in severe cases, perhaps panic attacks, and it tends to, and social anxiety, and it tends to just hang around in the background and then be triggered under stressful situations. So if you want to think a bit about it like that, in terms of how the two things connect and can be seen as one thing happening. Okay, so that's some broad definitions for you. The next thing we need to do is talk about how some stress can actually be good for us and some not so good. So there's a really nice way of looking at this, and it's a law. I don't like calling it a law because obviously I don't think anything's absolutely definitively true, but there are two scientists called Yerkes and Dodson who have come up with this law called the Yerkes-Dodson law, obviously, and they've essentially said that performance increases with stress because you're put under more pressure. It's just like a time limit, right? If you've got 10 minutes to do a piece of work, your performance is probably going to increase because you know that you've only got 10 minutes, and during that 10 minutes, you've got to get the work done, so you're going to put in more effort, you're going to concentrate more, and the output is likely to be of a higher quality. But the performance only increases up to a point. And when levels of stress or pressure become too high, too overwhelming, so an example of that might be you've got to write an essay in 2 minutes. That's just a ridiculous ask. It's an impossible task, and it makes us feel so much stress and so much pressure that our performance decreases. We give up, we throw the towel in, we feel so much stress that we find it difficult to concentrate. So looking at it like that really helps us to see that actually a little bit of stress, a little bit of time pressure or anxiousness maybe about trying to hand something in on time, and the challenge being proportional to the amount of time you have available to do it in, is actually a good thing, and it makes us perform well. But too much pressure, too much challenge actually works the other way and doesn't give us enough positive incentive to get the ball rolling and actually try at the task. We become overwhelmed, we struggle to focus, and our performance decreases. So that's a nice way of thinking about it, to see how stress can actually be used as a good thing. And that's really what you want to try and do, is channel stress and anxiety into positive actions. And that's a theme throughout this podcast. I also wanted to talk about what happens if you go the other way. So what if there is zero stress at all in your life? Totally chilled out Zen experience. Sounds good, right? And I think in certain context, if you're talking about it in a meditative context, so having a clear mind and being able to think clearly all the time, absolutely, that's cracking. But I would say having no stress, to me, seems like just a comfortable situation the whole time. And one thing I've definitely come to learn, and Joe Rogan, who's a podcast that I listen to a lot, he always talks about this, is comfort is the enemy of progress. It doesn't give you any challenge, any incentive, any good pressure to actually grow and do things and be proactive and try new skills, build something you're passionate about, try and do well in exams, overcome challenges, all those things. And I did a podcast on this, which I'll mention now. It's called Pina Coladas, obviously the non-alcoholic type, but it's essentially about this idea that a lot of people, I think, in their day-to-day, whether you're at school, whether you're at a job you don't like, a lot of them, I think, would think that just sitting on a beach, doing nothing, drinking pina coladas, non-alcoholic, obviously, would be nice and would be what they wanted to do for the rest of their lives. Maybe they don't think for the rest of their lives, but for a significant amount of time. And my argument there is, yeah, absolutely, for a week or two, it would be top-notch, absolutely delightful. But doing that for the rest of your life, just sitting on a beach, drinking pina coladas, not really doing much, being totally comfortable, having nothing to strive towards, grow, or just develop in any way, is really against how we're set up as human beings. We're all about progress, moving forward, forming social connections, being proactive, growing. You know, you're always growing. You if you want to metaphor for it, your cells in your body refresh. I don't know what the exact number is, but I know that all of them rejuvenate over a set period of time, which isn't actually that long. And it shows that everything's constantly renewing, refreshing, and it's part of how the world's put together. And if you don't have that, element of growth, you just have pure comfort, you're going to really do that full circle of you'll become stressed and anxious because you are so comfortable and you have nothing to grow towards, nothing to do. And your life will become there'll be no meaning there. And you want to try and move away from that and find something that you can grow towards and find challenging, but break it down, make it so that you can work towards it systematically over a period of time and the goals are achievable. Okay, that's the preamble done. Let's talk about a video that I've published before this podcast called 3 Simple Steps to Be Less Stressed at School. In this video, I talked about, and it's on YouTube if you want to have a look at it, but I'll run through real quick what I discussed. I just broke out 3 themes that I thought were really important to controlling your stress and anxiety levels. So they were perspective, planning, and the final one was routines. Perspective, planning, and routines. And then I went into a little bit of broad detail on what they were, but in this podcast, I really want to give you some concrete techniques you can start using to do those three things. And by doing them or paying attention to those principles, your stress levels and anxiety levels are going to be a bit more controllable. Nice. Let's get into it. Perspective. I think this is so important because I know that when I was at school, I definitely had I was in the weeds, so to speak. I was just looking at what was in front of me the whole time, and I rarely took the time to step back from everything and just see it for what it is and gain a little bit of a vantage point on what I was doing, my exams, my social life at school, my sports, extracurricular, family life, all the things you care about, right? Your health, and just to gain a bit of perspective on it so that you can just put it in context and see it from an outsider's point of view, and that will give you a greater ability to make good decisions because you're more objective that way. You're not in the first person making subjective decisions based on maybe emotions or how you're feeling at the time, not being able to see the big picture, that kind of thing. So I want to talk about one thing that is the classic exam fear, and I get it so much over DM, is what if a question comes up that I just don't know the answer to? That's the nightmare, right? That's what everybody's dreading. You're doing an essay-based exam, English or history maybe, and a question comes up and it's the one that you dreaded the night before. If it came up, you're just not going to be able to answer it, or you're definitely going to get a lower grade than you originally planned for. And immediately, I've seen people cry in exams. That's how bad it can get. People just walk out, cry, really lose control, and it's stress and anxiety just becoming overwhelming. Or you just can't think and you just scribble down a whole load of nonsense and you don't get a good mark anyway. You don't even give yourself a chance. So let's talk about, to begin with, just a real basic technique you can do to just gain a bit of perspective in that situation when you're in the exam and you see a question that's challenging, difficult, or you just really don't know where to start with it. The first thing, just breathe. Literally breathe. Some people just don't do this, start hyperventilating, panicking, their mind, starts getting all jumbled up. The first thing, you just need to clear your head. And yeah, the clock's ticking, but a minute in exam, think about it kind of one step back to take 2 steps forward. Take that minute out, just breathe. And the way you want to start breathing is not by, a lot of people, when you say take deep breaths, they start lifting their chest up and out maybe. And that's not actually the most effective way to just fill your lungs with oxygen. And I learned this on I went to an event called Unleash the Power Within with Tony Robbins in 2015. And I wanted to go along because I heard a lot about the guy. I'd used a lot of his digital information products to help me out with my own psychology and my approach. And I think that's really ingrained in me now, and I'm thankful for that, in that's my default state, just being very positive and having some good psychological techniques to stay positive and keep moving forward. But one of the things he mentioned was how to breathe properly, or how to actually get the most amount of oxygen in your lungs so that your body is able to use it and get all your respiratory systems working so that your body's functioning in optimum state. And he was saying you actually want to almost breathe from the stomach. So breathing out is you should see your belly or abdomen expand out. And what that does is it draws your diaphragm down. And naturally, your lungs are based on pressure. So the pressure inside your lungs is going to go down, reduce, and that forces air into them. And then obviously on the exhale, you're pushing the air out of your lungs, and the pressure is increasing, therefore it is exhaled out of the body. And I never really knew that, but I really think about that consciously now, and it's nice to be able to think about the conscious mechanism of you breathing. It's a simple technique, but even just 3 really deep breaths from the stomach, drawing that diaphragm down, expanding the lungs, just gives you that perspective of, look, relax. Let's think about a way to approach this question. So that's the first thing you can do. And then I think off the back of that, you've then got to say, right, what do I have to work with? Reread the question 3 times, highlight the keywords. What would be the next logical step? Can I write out a rough introduction? Like, what would be the things that I could maybe talk about here? Do I have any quotes in the bank that I could use? Have I got any topic sentences that I wrote out before the exam that I could plug into this question? How can I make an argument that flows so that, again, thinking from the examiner's perspective, the person who's marking this, how am I going to scramble some marks? Those are the kind of questions that want to be going through your head. That's a bit more exam technique-y. What I've tried to do there is give you that breathing technique to just get you to see it for what it is. It's just an exam. Clear your head, get some oxygen in your body, get yourself performing at a peak state. The second technique I'm going to recommend you use is a technique that answers the second most asked question I receive in the DMs on WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram. And that is not related to the exam specifically, but it's just in general. Throughout exam season, people are anxious, people are stressed. How do you handle that? How do you gain a bit of perspective? And this exercise is called perspective setting. It's a bit of a rip-off of Tim Ferriss's fear setting. He's another really popular podcaster. Wrote a book called The 4-Hour Workweek, which I read when I was at uni and loved it. It was a good book. And essentially, this exercise involves you laying out what you're most afraid about in terms of exams and them going wrong and all the opportunities that might be closed down. You've got to make that clear. Write them all down in one column. And then in the next column, write down what you could do to recover the situation. So if you did flunk all your exams, what would be your options? Is it an apprenticeship? Is it maybe a second choice uni? Is it you go and work for that person down the road that you cleaned their car once and you're going to go and ask them for a job and then you're going to rebuild your career that way? Write that down. Figure out what your options are, how you could recover the situation, because that's going to give you a bit of perspective on, okay, if it does go badly, what could I do? And you've already got a plan in place. You're ready to go. And in a weird way, that's going to allow you to actually have a bit more clear focus when you're doing the exams, and you won't be so overwhelmed by the pressure and the stress. The third column, you want to look at your current position and how that relates to, let's say, the standard position for everybody of your age group or educational level in the world. Because I guarantee you, if you're listening in the UK or any economically developed country, you are in an incredible position compared to the vast majority of the world. So many people over the globe would love to have the opportunity that you have to sit and take some exams and try and prove themselves and better themselves and have something that says you can do this, or you have completed this and therefore you are qualified to go to this level of education or have this opportunity or be put forward for whatever. It's so important that you understand that and realize it's a positive thing. Try and take the opportunity. Don't be afraid of it, because so many people would love to have it. And, you know, I mentioned you just have to be from an economically developed country. Really, if you're listening to this over the world, the world is so big that it's highly unlikely that your situation, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's highly unlikely that your situation is the worst one in the world out there. There's probably someone who's worse off, having a harder life, tougher time, less opportunities, doesn't even get to go to school, that kind of thing. And just putting that in perspective and thinking, wow, I'm lucky just to have these basic things that I take for granted every day, is really going to give you some momentum and get-go to actually say, look, let's just have a crack. Let's see what I can do here to try and do well, because I know how much other people would try to do well at this thing I'm doing if they were given the opportunity, but they're not lucky enough or fortunate enough to have it. So that's a little exercise you can do and try that out. I also want to talk about, just going to a different aspect of exams totally, is the social side of exams. Exams are a social test as much as they are an intelligence test. They're an emotional intelligence test as well. And what I mean by that is the decisions you make around your friends and, for example, things that we all do when we're young, going out around exam season, things like the driving test. If you're 18 and you're taking your A levels, trying to get into university, everybody really wants to drive, it seems, immediately, and they'll even take driving lessons that cut into all their valuable time that they could revise, even when it's a couple of days before their exams. I'd be plenty of people who were doing that when I was taking my A levels. Yeah, things like, as I mentioned, going out in general, whether it's a night out, whether it's just random leisure, whether it's just pressure to have a gaming sesh or do X, Y, and Z, parties, whatever it is. There's all this social dynamic to exams, which I don't think is talked about enough. And people need to have ways of handling that, because it can cause stress and pressure if you don't know. For example, I've been on plenty of nights out when it's quite clear that someone just doesn't want to be there because they've got other stuff on their mind, but they don't know how to talk to their friends and just say, hey, look, like, I just don't fancy it tonight, or I've got work on. And they can't say that in a meaningful way, or they're just not confident enough, and that, well, they just don't think they can have that kind of conversation with their friends, and that, well, they haven't figured out how to do it. And it means that your anxiety and your stress is just going to build up because you're not actually doing what you need to be doing, and you know it as well, which puts you even in an even tighter spot. And there's a couple of things you can do here. Is, from my perspective, looking back on it, just play the long game in terms of knowing what's over the hill. And I'm going to tell you right now, because I've done my A-levels, I've done my GCSEs, I've done my university exams. I guarantee you, if there are a load of parties or nights out during your exam season, I'm not saying don't go to any of them, because no, that's not a sustainable solution. I'm saying be selective. If you can clearly see it's taking up a lot of your revision time, and you're having, say, huge all-nighters, and then you're not able to actually do any revision the next day, and you have 2 or 3 bad days on the trot, that's going to put you in a poor position for the exam. So you have to be able to make those decisions, and it's different with every social group in terms of how you're going to handle that conversation. But absolutely, I wouldn't treat it as a big sit down and sit all your friends down and be like, look, I'm smashing my exams this year, so I'm not going to go out. I wouldn't recommend that. I'd just say, look, be able to put it in perspective. Just say, hey guys, act casual about it. That's my advice. Act casual. Act as if it's nothing. Because if you act as if it's nothing, no biggie. Hey, I just need to stay inside tonight because we've got a load of revision to do. I'm just going to crack on, smash it out, and then I'll see you tomorrow for whatever you're doing tomorrow with them. That kind of balance, right? And act as if it's nothing, and they'll think, hey, it's chill. It's nothing. If you make a big deal out of it, it's going to be a big deal. That's my advice there. So the key thing is learning how to manage those relationships, whether it's the nights out during exam season. You will have thousands of nights out in your life. You've got plenty of time to do all that. The whole fake ID thing when you're 18 and wanting to get in and all that, that's all around. Of course it is. And be selective, but I guarantee you, there's a lot of opportunities that you might miss out on because you get poor exam results that will give you so much more time to have leisure and do those nights out than if you flunk your exams because you took the short-term incentive of smashing a few nights out when you didn't need to, or you should have been prioritizing your exams, and you're going to be stuck in a job which pins you down and doesn't give you any freedom to actually go on nights out and have a laugh and be free with your time, as much as, say, if you did something else and did well in your exams and prioritize your time effectively during that time. The same principle applies to things like being obsessed with getting your driving license when you're 18, or if you're in your GCSE year, let's have an example there. If you're, I don't know, gaming a lot, or just spending a lot of time FaceTiming your girls or whatever it is, or you're doing little girl meetups where you're just spending a load of time socializing, I'd say just try and knock it back. Just figure out what's your schedule, what does it allow for, and play the game that way, because you have so much time. Life's a lot longer than you think. Again, we're talking about perspective here. Look over the hill see what's coming, know what's coming down the line. I'm trying to give you that insight right now. You're going to have so much time to FaceTime, meet up with your friends, and do all that stuff. The summer holidays are just around the corner. You can absolutely smash it during that period of time, and that's short-term thinking. I'm talking about these decisions that you make during exam season having an impact on how much freedom you have to do what you want to do later in life, and that's a big thing. So take that on board. The next thing is the third and final thing I'll mention on the perspective section, but it's key because it's meditation, by the way. It's key. My thoughts were getting a bit scrambled there, so I thought I'd let you know what I was thinking, and then I'm going to talk about what I think about it. Meditation. Yeah, when I was between the age of 13 to 18, I think I only associated this with kind of Buddhist dudes or monks that are just real chilled out, on a mountain somewhere, eating nothing, drinking nothing, and just closing their eyes cross-legged and letting their minds go blank. I didn't even know it was about letting your mind go blank, actually, meditation. I didn't even really understand it. What I would say is take a look at that, because the landscape's changed a lot in terms of how meditation is seen culturally. I think there's a lot of apps out there. For example, Headspace, Calm. Look at those apps. They are. I'm not sure if I think there's a free version. Maybe I downloaded Headspace and used it a little while ago, but I know there's a paid version as well, which is very good. And it just gives you that 10 minutes of don't think about anything, chill, relax, let your mind go blank, give yourself some perspective, and then revisit your tasks and what you need to do. Do I meditate every day now? No. Do I use guided meditation? No. But I do probably every other day, or whenever I'm feeling a little bit stressed out, I just take 5, close my eyes and allow my mind to go blank. I don't have any guided meditation or anything. I just try to think about nothing. And am I very good at thinking about nothing? No, my mind's whizzing a lot of the time. But the very act of me trying to do it, and I might get 2, 3, 4 seconds of it, and it feels great. You just think about absolutely zero. I'd recommend you do the guided meditations to begin with, because that will give you an idea of what you're actually trying to do. And then just go your own and use it as a little tool just to gain a bit of perspective, to reset to zero and allow your mind to go nice and blank and clear and absorb information when you go back to your revision and gain a bit of perspective on the whole exam process. Okay, the next thing I talked about in that video about exam stress and anxiety was planning. Because if you're good at planning, you can anticipate situations. You can feel in control. That's essentially what planning does, is it just makes you in control. And once you feel in control of things, it's very difficult to feel stressed out or anxious about anything. Because, okay, let's play it out here. Let's say a stressful situation comes into your day. Something unexpected happens, maybe. Immediately, you're just going to be able to absorb that and figure out, okay, where does it fit into my plan? How do I need to adjust things? Plans are all about adjustment as well. Adjusting on the fly, flying the plane and fixing it. Constantly thinking, okay, how do I adjust towards my new priority? What does this new piece of information that I've received today mean for my plan? And constantly being able to do that means you're just going to be able to keep the momentum going and moving forward and not allowing anxiety or stress to have all the negative impacts it can have, such as overwhelm, not feeling like you're in control, not growing towards anything. And I really dug into detail on the relationship between ourselves and our smartphones. And I used this wacky metaphor about the relationship being, with most people, the smartphone is telling them what's important, what they should do, and when they should do it, really, through the notifications. Okay, you can schedule and set out a Google Calendar on your smartphone, which is useful because that's you inputting information into your phone saying, I want you to do this, this, and this for me, or remind me of this, this, and this. But things like notifications, if left unchecked, are actually notifying you about things that aren't very relevant, really don't align with your priorities, and they need to be managed. I use the metaphor of seeing your smartphone like your personal assistant, being its boss, telling it, I need you to do this, this, and this, and I need it done by this time. And being a bossy boss as well. Bossy boss, what a word. I I basically talk about it in that way because that's how you got to see it. The smartphone is your employee. You extract value from it. Now, that's a very, extracting value from employees. That's a very capitalistic way of thinking about things. Employees are human beings. I'd say treat your smartphone like an employee that isn't a human being. It's just a piece of tech. It doesn't have feelings. You don't need to be nice to it. You just tell it what to do and it will do it for you, but you got to be strict with it. Otherwise, it will start taking the mickey and giving you rogue notifications, things that don't matter, and pretending as if they do. Social media is fantastic at doing this. It's all about attention. It's all about getting your attention on their app so that they can up their advertising. Well, that's how the advertising market really works. The whole auction buying system. You have to have people on the platform to watch the ads that people pay for on those platforms. That's how it works. Yeah, they need to give you a good service as well. Otherwise, it would just be attention grabbing. But I think I've talked about this in another blog post about revision timetables and motivation, that essentially the trade-off between making a really useful app that allows people to connect versus the capitalistic needs of a company that's IPO'd and has the pressure from Wall Street or any kind of London financial market means there's always going to be a trade-off there between utility of the app and it grabbing your attention at all possible costs. Remember that. Okay. How do you actually use your smartphone as if it were a personal assistant? The first thing I think people jump to are the apps that don't use it as a personal assistant, but block off all the distractions. So the classic ones are, there's ones for your laptop as well: Cold Turkey, Hocus Focus, Freedom, Hold App. Hold App's probably my favorite out of those, even though I don't use any of them. Hold App rewards people with things like cinema tickets, discounts, bonuses for the amount of time they don't spend on their phone. But it's cool ideas, but I just don't think it's practical because it's not addressing the root cause of the problem. It's just a preventative mechanism, which is good, but I much prefer attacking the root cause of problems and then building up from there. If you look at what the root cause of the problem is that we have a technical device or technological device that has been set up in a way that can trigger specific parts of our psychology, either to make us use it in an addictive way, so creating addictive loops that we go into apps because we see notifications, we immediately click on it. I've definitely had it where I've just picked up my phone randomly. It's almost like a twitch that I have, and you just open it and immediately you're on an app. That's the kind of addiction loop that we're getting into, because it's using or triggering things like FOMO, like that's fear of missing out, if you need it spelled out. But I know a lot of people know about that, like social pressure, social proof, all the ways that we're set up as human beings in society to work as social animals. Social media is taking advantage, I think, is a bit of a strong word, but it's definitely using that to fuel its finances and to get people on the platform. It's using our attention or exploiting it in a way that is quite difficult for us to counter against. Okay, so we've got to this stage. Now where do we go? I want to look at some of the ideas that I've been exposed to over the last 5 years that has informed my approach to the way I use my smartphone and how I look at everything. And I really do believe that this way that I've developed, and I'm going to put a lot more time and attention into really penning it out and making it clear, because I need to clarify it for myself. But at the same time, by doing these podcasts and doing little pieces of research here and there, clarifying my thoughts, I'm able to actually get the system laid out a bit more and give you the things that influenced me, so that maybe they might help you in your belief system about the smartphone, because that's what you need to work on. It's It's the software that you're running inside your head, how you think about it, that needs to be updated, upgraded to handle this device that is constantly getting upgraded and updated to extract more of our attention. So the first thing I would say is I sat next to a very interesting guy I was going from a flight from London to San Francisco in 2015. I was going there to travel down the Californian coast, and I got on this plane and just started a conversation with the guy next to me. And he was I can't remember his exact job title, but essentially he made signs in airports or any kind of public place. And he was talking, so signs as in, telling people where to go, directions and things you see on walls to give you information about where you are and relevant things around you. And he talked about this really interesting psychologist or scientist, really, called Robin Dunbar. And he mentioned a theory called Dunbar's number, or Dunbar's 150. And essentially, Robin Dunbar has done some research out of Oxford University to say that 150 people is roughly the amount of people that someone can maintain stable social relationships with. And when I heard that number, it didn't actually surprise me too much, because it kind of makes sense. You think about the history of human beings. We were always in smallish tribes, small groups, and the amount of people that we would actually know on a name basis, and we'd know something perhaps about their personal lives, so that we were able to reasonably say hello to them in a coffee shop or something like that, rather than and have them actually know who we were, would be relatively small. But ever since social media's come around, thousands and thousands of connections and people have come into our lives. And I think this number of 150 really grounded me in thinking, actually, you can't maintain relationships with everybody. How can you focus on the ones that are right in front of you, that actually mean something already? How can you build those and grow those into something that's really meaningful? And just by thinking about things in a little bit of a smaller term. So I think I'm looking at my Facebook at the moment, personal Facebook. I hardly use it anymore, but at the moment I'm on about 1,500 friends. I do not have 1,500 friends. I have about 25 that I even count as close friends, and there's probably about 15 I see regularly, and that's it. That is it. And just to think of it like that the internet makes us think that all these relationships need to be maintained, and it's just not possible by the way that we work. It's just not feasible. And that, in fact, can cause you a lot of anxiety and stress, in that thinking that, wow, there's all these people out there. I've got to maintain these relationships. I've got to worry about what they're thinking about me and what they're doing and what's going on in their lives. No, you don't. Just focus on the people that are in front of you, that you either go to school with. You can grow your friend group. Don't worry. You're not going to be just limited to those people, but add them in ones and twos and grow meaningful relationships, not ones that you check in once a year to say happy birthday. I'd much prefer someone didn't say happy birthday to me, but worked on actual relationship building, talking to me in person on a daily basis, picking up on little things. I'm trying to do that with other people, obviously, but just trying to be self-aware and think about what I would like. That's cool. Proper relationship building, time invested in a number of different formats, not just online, actually spending time with people in real life and getting to know them. That's so, so crucial. So the first tip there, in terms of changing your beliefs around social media, shrink everything. It's way too expansive. I think you're letting too many, and I know I was doing this, I'm letting too many people into my conscious daily thoughts. Reduce that number. So a few classic things you get happening on Instagram and Snapchat. Instagram, the like button, it's huge. Everybody is using it, looking at it, sometimes using it to compare themselves against other people. And how many likes do you get? You see this a lot with people, for example, on Instagram stories or on Snapchat stories, will post photos or reminders to say, hey, go and like my post on Instagram because it matters to them. And really, if you're in that position, you're going to be in a tough spot with stress and anxiety, because it means that you are looking for the approval of other people. And if you don't get it, you're going to be stressed, anxious, not feeling as good about yourself as you otherwise should. You need to try and develop a mindset which is bulletproof to all that and resistant to it, because your self-esteem is already high enough and you believe in yourself, you're happy with how you are. It's not based on other people's opinions. It doesn't really matter. You don't have any FOMO because you're happy with what's in front of you and the friends you're interacting with. You're not kind of dreaming about the grass is always greener. You're working on what you can actually impact and improve in real life, and you're not too worried about the perception of that on social media. It's a key mindset to have. And one of the key influences that I've been looking at in this area is a guy called Cal Newport, and he's another scientist out of America who has come up with this idea called digital minimalism. And this is how he defines it. It's a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value, and then happily miss out on everything else. Think about that. Think about extracting value from this technology rather than just giving it value or giving it your energy, which then dissipates or dilapidates all of your energy because you're feeling so stressed and anxious by the things you're seeing on there, the comparisons you're making, all the other people, all the other things they're doing, the FOMO that might be happening because you're not getting invited this party, that party, this party. When you really put that into perspective, long term, it doesn't really matter. Focus on your little friend group, your little world that you can improve. See over the horizon 10, 15, 20 years from now and plan for that. Maintain the relationships that are really going to matter, and you're going to be in a much better spot both now with your anxiety and your stress, and in 20 years' time, you're going to be in a position to actually be able to have some freedom in your life. You'll have some great relationships there that you've been able to focus on because you've been using your time and attention wisely, knowing what's actually valuable and what isn't. And that kind of investment, that compounding over time, I always say it, attention is the new global currency. It's how you invest it over time, which is going to really, really impact the quality of your life, and in the short term, the quality of your exam results. And another thing that's so important is, okay, we're trying to plan for the future here. We're using a little bit of history. We've talked about perhaps how human beings are set up to function in tribes. We've looked a bit into the future, what we might want to plan for in terms of how we'd like our life to plan out and what kind of relationships we want to have. The deep, meaningful ones, which are proven to actually be the kinds of relationships that human beings thrive off of, rather than very surface level, meaningless ones, essentially, that are built on ulterior motive or the fact that you care too much about what other people think, so you're not your own person. You just do whatever you can to make them happy, and you never make yourself happy. And the weird thing about it is, if you make yourself happy first, you'll find that actually you're in a much better position to make everybody else happy too. But the thing I was going to mention is looking at the present. Look at what's happening right now, the research that's being done. And I'll let you in on some now that Cal Newport has done loads of it on this subject of smartphones, digital minimalism, and basically how the internet and specifically social media has really shaken up our psyche as human beings and how we do things, and we need to react to it and adapt so that we're actually kept on a sustainable path forward rather than one that's we're just going to crash out and burn out. So he actually cites a professor. I'm just looking inside the book here to get the right quote for you, but it's Gene Twenge from San Diego State University, who's a psychology professor, and he cites an article that was written in the Atlantic, and essentially the key takeaway here is that Professor Twenge says that young people born between 1995 and 2012, so these people are called iGen or Gen Z, however you want to, all these different terminologies, like millennials, for example. For my generation, I was born in 93, so I suppose I'm not categorized in this generation, but there's a bit of give and take. It's not clear-cut boundaries. But the key thing is, professors and psychologists are noticing that anxiety and stress rates among people born in these years are skyrocketing, and the only thing that currently they're looking at that correlates with this is the explosion of smartphone usage around, well, I suppose ubiquitous adoption took place around 2012, 2013 in the States, maybe 2014, maybe in the UK, and ubiquitous is meaning pretty much everyone had one, with the kinds of internet speeds and connectivity to constantly be feeding off a stream of social media content, no matter where you are, with using 3G, 4G, obviously 5G is coming. It's so important to look at this data and react to it now, rather than in 10, 15 years being in a position where all the research has been done to say that this stuff was actually having a very negative impact on people's psychology, when if there's stuff being done already, you're in a position to make some moves and set something up to make sure you stay on the straight and narrow and that you're able to manage your stress and anxiety. And there are ways. And I do think in terms of the planning and the smartphone usage, you can use apps, but really try and work on your belief system and how you think about yourself in relation to other people. And once you've done that and you've read around the subject a bit, maybe you've got some ideas from what I've just mentioned, you're going to be able to detach yourself a bit from it, really not need the constant feed of information that we've become accustomed to. And I'm just as guilty of this as maybe you are, who's listening now. You know, I found myself this morning, I was watching a YouTube video of a load of footballers just having a punch-up in training. And I watched about 10 minutes of it. I just escaped and went into that. And okay, that's a different example of what we've been talking about. It's just wasted attention, wasted time. I'm not perfect. I'm doing things the whole time, which is silly, spending time where I shouldn't be. But I'm so conscious of it now that I'm always working at it. And that's all you can do. You know, I always talk about the gym because that's something that I like doing, and over different stages in my life I've had different goals in the gym. And yeah, I'm not Mr. Universe, and I'm not a personal trainer or anything like that, but I know that if I go into the gym and just try and do my best, I'm not going to get everything spot on, but just keep the intensity high, keep the effort high, be conscious of trying to get the form right, you're going to make progress. And the same principle applies to using your smartphone. And I know it sounds ridiculous to be almost telling you how you should be using it and how you should be thinking about it, but I really think looking at the studies, looking at Professor Twenge, looking at Cal Newport, looking at the media, just look at the media, what's out there at the moment. This stuff is impacting us, and we've got to figure out ways to handle it or nip it in the bud, handle it from the root cause, because that's how you're really going to be able to use it. Because I don't think, perhaps, unlike Dr. Newport or Cal Newport, I don't know if he's a doctor, I don't think he is, Cal Newport, they're all psychologists and professors, so you're always tempted to call them doctor. Anyway, I digress. All I'm saying is I don't necessarily agree with his philosophy entirely of digital minimalism. I think it's a great start, a phenomenal start, and some of the work he's done is really, really interesting, and I've really been enjoying his book, and I'd highly recommend it if you want to have a read of it. But he says, okay, it's about looking at technology and extracting all the value you can from it. I think that's a great starting point. I would like to develop that a bit more maybe, and or not develop it, actually let me rephrase that, take it from a different angle. So my angle or my philosophy would be much more based on how you're using the apps. So instead of looking to or focusing on the extraction of value, I'd much more focus on the buttons you're pressing in apps, what you're looking at, how you focus on different pieces of the app. So for example, look at Snapchat. I think Snapchat groups are an amazing way for staying in contact with your best friends. I think publisher stories, the big feed that you're given at the bottom of Snapchat, can be quite destructive because it brings in a lot of sensational news, a lot of comparative stuff, a lot of celebrity gossip that, yeah, if you're interested in that, it could be, fun. And I always watch soaps and different kind of reality TV shows. Yeah, there is a time and a place for it. But if you're getting really embroiled into that stuff and you're almost living an escapist lifestyle through it, it's going to really detract from the time you can spend working on the things that matter in your own life, and that's going to boost your anxiety and stress levels by a lot. So I really focus on, within Snapchat, you want to be spending a lot of time on, I haven't got my phone in front of me, but I think it's on the left side where the social side of Snapchat is, where your friends are, your friend groups are, your messages are, rather than the right side when you swipe right on the app with the publisher stories, which is a bit of an attention drain, I think. It's just my perspective. But anyway, look at that, and I'd also look at the hierarchy of apps. So recently, I've turned off all notifications on my phone. Now, I very rarely do that. I usually just have email and WhatsApp on and everything else off, and maybe Snapchat on as well, actually. But I've recently turned it off because I was getting quite busy at work, and I'm working pretty hard at the moment to pump out as much content and deal with all the people on the 7-day exam plan, which is quite labor intensive, and I've got to be on the ball there. So I thought, in order to make more time for that, I'm gonna nullify all social notifications and just almost treat my phone as a kind of still pool of water. So I open it up and I can't see any notifications. There's nothing on there. And what this does is it makes clear to me my priorities already from the get-go, rather than having the phone suggest something to me. I can go in and decide I know where my important stuff is likely going to be. And if I miss a few things, it's not the end of the world. It doesn't really matter. It's my social side. It's not the business side that I need to prioritize. I use two separate phones. I'm talking about my personal phone here, and then I have a business phone as well, where I obviously keep the notifications bright and bold, so I can make sure I get back to everything in time and get anyone who needs customer service the service they need. But essentially, have that hierarchy of apps. I know on my social side, I'm going to WhatsApp first, because that's where all my friends are. That's where I've got the DMs going, the groups going. That's where the meaningful relationship connection building is. Facebook, Instagram feeds, I'm not spending any time there at all. I'm not scrolling. I'm not DMing any of my friends. I know that I'm contacting them on WhatsApp. The next place I'll go is email, just because I have a few updates in there that I usually have. But I'm checking that periodically. I'm not checking when I get an email. I'm checking maybe 2-3 times a day and batch answering. That kind of approach is really, really important. And I think it is in line with what Cal Newport is saying by extracting all the value, but maybe I've just built a small layer on top of that to say, just think about the way you use the apps and how regularly, and really creating a system around it, a hierarchy almost of what's the most important app that you need to be focusing on, regardless of the notifications it's giving you. You know it's important, so you're going there and checking it systematically, periodically, and that will save you time, because you're not having random information that's unimportant that could increase your stress and anxiety levels come in randomly throughout your day. Okay, and the third and final thing I talked about in the video about stress and anxiety was routines. And I mentioned routines as a principle because I think when you position something this way and you know that there are a set of steps that you can take to achieve something or get something done, it's really nice to have that, because, if you plug and play, you do that, you're going to have a new outcome. And hopefully in this context, it will mean you go into the routine stressed and anxious, and you come out the other side of the routine with reduced levels of stress and anxiety. So online, the classic solutions to stress and anxiety you'll get in the form of routines are things like diet, managing your health in general, sleeping right, exercising, and I think everybody knows that. It's obvious, and a lot of high-level vlogs and listicles will just list these out, and they'll be like, cool, go and do it. I'm going to try and recommend some much more specific activities around these, and also that are just separate from these that you can use in relation to your exams. So the things that I've just mentioned, know that creating a routine around them is important, and it can help reduce your stress and anxiety. I'll just go through some high-level recommendations now. There's a lot more detailed stuff out there from specialists in each of these different areas, but think about it. Your health, 5 fruit and veg a day, making sure your balance of healthy fats, proteins, carbs is all as recommended by any kind of health specialist, or what makes you feel good. Often we can just kind of respond or feel how our bodies are feeling after just nailing a whole bag of sweets. You don't feel too good. You get this massive sugar rush and then a big low. Or you chin 2 cups of coffee in a row and you're shaking because you're buzzed with caffeine. That kind of thing. And just setting up a routine around it. So, for example, I know I have 1 coffee in the morning and then I have 1 coffee around 2 p.m. And that's me for the day. That's my routine around drinking coffee. Just an example there. The next thing, sleep. Again, ballpark figures, I'd say 6 to 8 hours. I always try to take anywhere between then there on. I've kind of figured out 6 is the least I can take and still perform a high level. I do sometimes take less than that, sure, but I notice a drop in my performance and my concentration when I do that. So I try and get 6. I try and stick to 8 if I can, to try and just really keep my sleep as healthy as possible, because obviously the more you can get, the better. In some circumstances, obviously you don't want to be oversleeping, because then you probably get stress from not having enough time in the day to do what you need to do. Again, it's that balance. Let's have a look. Exercise. Just keeping it intense. 20-minute stress relievers. I talk about them the whole time. Regular, intense exercise. Getting it done. There's more resources on the internet you can use, but let me talk about something specific to exams. Let's talk about revising, and how revising can be a stressful and anxious process, or an anxiety-inducing process. One of the ways you can reduce this, and this is backed by a study, so in 2004, a research paper published in Linguistics and Education saw that revising with peers is an effective study technique, as it allows individuals to better absorb their notes. I'll add a bit to that. I would say part of this study, that the key bit to take out of it is the testing technique. That I don't think they knew this at the time, because Professor Dunlowski's study, who essentially says that active recall is the best study technique for understanding and memorizing information. That was done after 2004. So this specific study that we're talking about would not have known that yet. So when you're studying with friends, make sure you're asking each other questions. You're not just randomly talking around the subject. Ask each other specific questions, test each other, help each other out with the answers, and that's going to be much more effective than just randomly parroting back stuff back and forth to each other. I would say as well, the ability for these kinds of revision sessions to reduce your stress and anxiety is really found in you expressing your stressful situations to your friends. So if there's a bit of the topic or the syllabus that you don't understand, articulate that to your friend, and maybe they can help you out. Get it off your chest. Say you're finding this bit difficult, and what do they know about it, and try and work it out together. You got 2 pairs of hands instead of 1, and just getting those anxious feelings off your chest is really going to help, because your friend will probably share some of theirs with you, and then you kind of don't feel in it alone, and you can look at, okay, what do we know when we combine our brains? How can we try and get around this? Is there someone else who could help us out? Can we bring them into the group? And the moment you start doing this, I used to do this a lot when I was just walking back and forth from lessons, and there was a few people that I'd do it the whole time, because they were quite receptive to it, and it was great. It really made me feel like, oh, actually, a lot of other people don't know stuff. And also, a lot of the times they would know stuff that I didn't know, or I'd know stuff that they didn't know, which would make me feel good. It would make them feel good that they knew stuff I didn't know, but then we'd both be learning because we'd be giving each other the answers and the ways of understanding it. And it was incredibly useful, not just for achievement, but lowering those stress and anxiety levels. So think about that. Have a little challenge. If you walk to school with someone, if you have friends that you walk to and from different lessons with, just bring up little conversations about, oh, did you understand that? What exactly was the teacher on about there? Do you know that? Those kind of questions, and just let them talk and see what they say, and help them out with any problems they have. And you'll find it's a very, very good situation to be in for relieving stress and anxiety. The other thing you want to do, and I mentioned this as a key routine in the 7-day exam plan, and I break it all down into exactly what you want to be doing, but really, when you finish an exam, you want to be avoiding people who are going to put you in a stressful mindset. They're going to start talking about what they put as the answer, whether you were right or wrong. In fact, the only person who knows what's right and wrong in an exam is the examiner. But these people are the speculators. They are frantically trying to really figure out how well they've done, and it doesn't help you at all because they're just chucking random pieces of information into your mental space and throwing you off track for the next exam, because all that's going to happen there is you're going to hear something that you didn't put or that they think's right, and you'll just start thinking about that the whole time and not think about what is now the most important thing in your list of priorities, which is the next exam. The exam that you've just done has immediately gone from being probably the most important thing you were doing that day to the least important thing ever in your life, because you just focus on that next exam. Avoid people who speculate, want to try and prove other people wrong, and just stick with a person or people who literally come out of the exam and just say, how'd it go? And they say, yeah, it went fine. Don't talk about any of the answers, don't talk about anything you put, and then just crack on. Talk about sport, talk about music, talk about the goss, whatever it is. Just don't talk about the exam. There's no benefit in talking about any of it because you've just done it. It's over. The results have been decided. Crack on. That will reduce your stress and anxiety for the next exam and throughout exam season, the types of conversations you have with people after exams. Remember that. Next, another technique you can use, and it's around routine building, is before exams, visualizing outcomes that you want to see when you're in the exam. So one of my favorite metaphors or visualization scenarios that I saw happen on TV was School of Hard Knocks, which is a rugby program where there's a load of convicts, or they're not convicts over here, they're people who have been in prison and or have had difficulty in their community. And Scott Quinnell and Will Greenwood, who are both ex-rugby players, internationals, take them, create a 15-man team, and basically train them up and get them playing rugby as a physical, positive outlet for their energy. And Scott Quinnell is doing a team talk, and he mentions, it always makes me laugh when I watch it because he just gets so passionate about it, which is absolutely cracking. But he talks about the butterflies in the stomach before the game, and it's a bit like an exam, right? You do feel butterflies before anything that is going to require you to perform. And he talks about those butterflies, imagining them turning into fire-breathing dragons. And obviously he's saying it in a Welsh accent as well, which is just superb. And it's riveting stuff. But it's one of my favourite scenes. And I like that analogy in that you think about things in an imaginative way to use them positively. So butterflies associated with anxiety and stress, you're turning them into these fire-breathing, powerful dragons that are just going to blow away anything in their path. Easy. That's how we roll. That's how you do things. That's the process that we're trying to create in an exam. You're just powering through this stuff, and all the anxiety and stress is just rechanneled into this new powerful image. I want to talk to you about something more specific now that you can do in terms of exams, because obviously the butterflies and dragons scenario is a bit specific to rugby, but if you like that, definitely Just close your eyes, go through a visualization process. Imagine those butterflies in your stomach. I'm closing my eyes and doing it right now, actually. Imagine those butterflies in your stomach turning into these powerful dragons and breathing fire out, and you're feeling positive about your ability to actually get stuff done, and you're not feeling the nerves, you're feeling the anticipation and strength that comes from that. Another thing you can do is something that I did on the Unleash the Power Within Tony Robbins course, which was a great technique, I thought, just for rewiring your brain and getting you into a positive mindset. It's called the switch technique. So essentially what you do is you take the image of you basically mucking up the exam, doing really badly. So imagine it now. Maybe you're sweating, your palms are sweating, you've got a worried face, you're writing frantically, you're crossing loads of stuff out because you're getting the answers wrong. You see the clock ticking, and it seems to be ticking really quick, and you're losing out on time, and you don't understand anything, etc. Imagine that in your head right now. And then what you want to do is you want to dim all the color on it, suck out all the color, make it black and white. Now you want to imagine it going all crinkly and crusty and old and looking a bit like one of those photos that is from the 1920s and has been in maybe a book for 80 years or however long it is since, and it's really decayed and old and fragile. And that's the image now in your head. And then what you want to do, just off to one side in your head, is see an image of you absolutely annihilating the exam, smashing it. Your pen is flowing. There is no sweat on your hands at all. You're sipping from your liquid thinking bottle, and every time you do, knowledge is streaming into your head. You know every single answer. You're just cracking out routine after routine, executing paragraph structure after paragraph structure, doing equations seamlessly. The time is ticking slowly. It seems like you've got more time than you actually need. Everything's beautiful. And you take that picture now to one side and you amp up the color, you boost the saturation. Everything's very bright, bold, and vivid. It's almost got, glittery sparkles all over it. It's great. And you blow that thing up now. It gets huge. It's massive. It's taking up your whole brain space. And now what you do is you switch it with a big whoosh in place of that crinkly, old, grim photo that you had in your mind of you messing up the exam. And at the moment, it's completely encompassed by this new image of you smashing the exam and doing well. It's filling up your whole head. You can't see anything but this amazing image of you crushing this exam. In fact, the old image now it's a tiny speck. You can hardly make it out. It's almost a speck of dust. It's a piece of ash that's just floating away in the distance. And this new huge image of you, big, bright and bold, smashing the exam, now fills up your whole mental space. And that's all you can see. And you can switch back and forth between these two images, but all the time, this new positive image is dominating your point of view and your perspective, and you almost imagine your whole head is filled up with this image in three-dimensional format. So that's my version of the switch method that Tony Robbins went through. But essentially, it's just a very good way of making sure you're in a positive mindset and you're seeing what could go right in the exam. And after doing that, your anxiety and stress levels are naturally going to be reduced because you would have just thought about the best possible outcomes. Even if you might still be a bit nervous, you're now tracking towards a positive outcome, a good picture, rather than looking at this bad situation the whole time and almost being magnetically drawn towards it. Okay, and the final technique I want to give, a final little bit of routine that might be useful for you, is if you have pets, if you have dogs, if you have cats, if they need walking. I don't think cats need walking, but dogs do, I know. I know cats don't need walking. Dogs do. Get out and take him for a dog walk. Ever since I got my first dog, Harley, who's now 11, when I was 13. And it helped me because I always took him out on walks, all the time. And 2 a day. And we'd share it around the family a bit, but I'd always do at least one. And that was a really nice bit of structure of getting outside, clearing your head, reducing stress and anxiety. And the great thing about dogs as well, I've never had a cat, I've had a hamster, I've had a couple of goldfish too. But pets in general, animals in general, they don't have all the anxieties and stresses that human beings have. They're very relaxed. They seem very at peace. They're just almost like these sponges that when you pet them and stroke them, they just dissipate away all the stress and anxiety because they just seem like they don't feel any of that. They're just living, just having a life. It's quite funny thinking about it. Actually, they're just here to have a good time, really, and that's it. And there's all these other things going on in our heads. When you look at it from their perspective, you think, actually, what am I worrying about? There's nothing to be worried about. Just relax, calm down, go outside, have a walk, take a look at what's around you, and take it all in. And I just think animals and dogs are a great way of doing that. So I thought I'd just let you into a little personal method I use there. And as I said, I would walk my dogs all the way through my teenage years. I would do it now. It's an amazing exercise for getting outside every single day, no matter what the weather. You're not cooped up inside, getting kind of cabin fever, and an incredible stress reliever as well. So that's it. Those are the techniques. That was a big podcast, an absolute doozy. I think it's the longest one I've ever done. So tell me if you enjoyed it. If you, I know I'm chucking a lot of information at you in these podcasts, but I'm trying to get the balance right between getting the information out to you so you can just work with the ideas, plus putting it into a format that's easily digestible and, most importantly, implementable for as many people as possible. So giving you a lot of range of ideas, both from my personal experience, other students' experience, what I've been seeing online, plus the academic studies that have been done. And if you like this podcast, what would really be useful is just give it a rating on iTunes. It's always helpful when I get them. It really helps people find out more about the Exam Coach and what I'm doing, and I'd love it and appreciate it hugely if you could go and do that after this podcast. The other thing that I'd mention is take a look at some other podcast episodes I have recorded on a similar subject of stress and anxiety in the past. So I'll rattle off a few now if you want to just kind of take a mental note or remember the episode numbers. Pressure is the tool for growth. That's episode 20. 2 minutes on my approach to the news. That's episode 45. Instagram, curated content and the highlight reel of life, episode 61. And the final one, perspective and pressure, episode 118. So you can have a look at those episodes. Again, they're episode 20, episode 45, episode 61, episode 118. And the way you'd search that is EP, full stop, and then the number. Sweet. Well, I am going to check out. I hope you have a superb rest of day. If you're about to go to bed, I hope you have a cracking night's sleep. You relieve that stress and anxiety that you're having. You use techniques on a daily basis to just keep it in check. Again, it's a constant process, this. You're not going to be able to just magically do everything and everything's going to be perfect. You just got to work at it little by little every day, make little improvements, switch it up every so often. So you've got a bit of variation there in the way you're approaching reducing your stress and anxiety. Find out what works for you and just keep cracking on and having a good go at it. I'm checking out.